Hello my dear friends, you're in the Military Summary channel, and today we will discuss the situation in Ukraine on the 15th of January of 2025. Today we have a lot of very interesting updates, so let's start. And first let's discuss the situation that took place yesterday. In the previous video we were talking that as a result of some military exercises the West managed to bring down the entire Russian internet, and today we got more details about the situation, and the sources are saying that the main cable damage in Tatarstan, causing internet speed drop for 3.8 million Russians in 21 regions. So that was stated by Russian Roskomnadzor, so the organization that is responsible for the internet. So it's just the situation when two things happened at the same time. The Western countries, NATO countries, began some military exercises with internet, with different things, and some probably let's say sabotage and reconnaissance group maybe of Ukraine, or as a result of drone attack, the internet cable in Tatarstan was damaged and destroyed. So anyway, this is the situation. Another important thing is coming from Kiev. As you know, during the previous night the Russians carried out massive missile attack all over the entire territory of Ukraine, and somewhere but by the noon time we start receiving videos and photos, mainly photos of the roads of Russian attacks. And according to, for example, to this picture, as you can see, the majority of missiles were heading exactly in the western part of Ukraine. The Ukrainians are saying that as a result of air defense work, the Ukrainians managed to bring down up to 30 missiles of 40, so it's very difficult to understand whether the Russians managed to deal significant damage or not. As for the Ministry of Defense of Russian Federation, they stated that as a result of this missile strike they managed to complete goals, every single goals they were tasked. You know, it's very important to see whether the Russians are planning to repeat this strike this upcoming night between the 15th and 16th of January, because this will give us the understanding whether the Russians seriously wants to deal as much as possible damage to Ukraine before the Trump's inauguration, or this attack that took place between the 14th and the 15th of January is just something like respond from Russian side on Ukraine attempts to attack deep inside the territory of Russia. But when talking about numbers, according to information we have, once again the Russians used just 40 missiles during the previous attack, and I must say that in 2024 sometimes the Russians were using, not sometimes, almost every single missile attack was included more than 100 or around 100 missiles. So based just on these numbers we can say that that wasn't something very big and very powerful from the Russian side, just to show the Ukrainians that they can do this, and maybe just to show Zelensky which targets, which facilities the Russians will try to destroy if he continue escalation. And according to most of the military experts, the Russians were trying to destroy the gas storages in the western part of Ukraine. I'll remind you that on the 31st of January the gas transportation construct has ended, and Ukrainians decided not to prolong the contract, and the Russians, using the secret channels, warned Zelensky that if he is not going to prolong the gas transportation contract, then most likely Russia will destroy this entire energy, this gas transportation system. During the day we got just one video from the western part of Ukraine. In this video we can see how the Russian missiles were flying and attacking the facilities in the western part of Ukraine in the Lvov region. Also, we got a few more important statements from Ukraine, and very interesting is that the Minister of Defense of Germany arrived in Kiev. He had a meeting with Zelensky, and as a result of meeting it was announced that Ukraine will soon receive another 60 anti-aircraft guided missiles for the IRIS-T air defense system. You know that since the beginning of the special military operation the Russians carry out hundreds, probably dozens of massive missile strikes, and you know that during the previous 3 years the Western countries found a solution how to adapt to this situation, how to minimize the damage that the Russians are able to deal to Ukrainian facilities. You know that the Russians from one strike to another use the same schema. First of all, the most important thing, the Russians always attack Ukraine with a significant number of missiles. The second thing, to use a significant number of missiles, the Russians first need to produce them. So using satellite data, using different numbers, using intelligence services. The Western countries always know when exactly the Russians are planning to attack Ukraine with a significant number of missiles. And always by the time when the Western countries know when exactly the Russians are going to attack, they start providing Ukraine different air defense systems and missiles. So what is the schema? Western countries, as a result of intelligence operation, discover approximately the dates when the Russians are going to attack. Before these dates, the Ukrainians began bombing and attacking the Russian oil facilities and oil depots with the purpose to destroy as many as possible fuel and not allow the Russians to use a lot of planes or to make lots of waves to attack or several days. This is the first thing. The second thing, every time before the beginning of this massive missile strike, Western countries begin providing Ukraine with different air defense systems and missiles for these air defense systems. When another wave of Russian missile attack ends, everything, both missiles and air defense systems, most likely are being redeployed back to the Western countries with the purpose to just to secure them and to save them. Because the Russians, they after another wave of attack, after they use everything they produce, they need up to 1 month to restore their, let's say, stockpiles and so on. So during this period of time, there is no need to keep air defense systems like Patriot, like Air-ST on the territory of Ukraine. Ukraine can use just maybe old Russian Soviet systems or something like this. And during this period of time, even if the Russians attack Ukraine with missiles and drones, usually Russians they're attacking not something important. So that's why there's no need to keep these powerful air defense systems. So this is the schema the Western countries managed to adopt, and now it's turn for the Russians to find a solution how to improve the schema and how to trick the Western countries and Ukraine as well. Another important thing is that Zelensky refused to lower the mobilization age to 18. The Western countries, for example, the Biden advisor Sullivan reported that it's ultimately important for Ukraine to reduce the mobilization age. But if you ask my opinion, I believe that these are political games. These are attempts to increase the power of Zelensky in society, to make him more popular, because now Ukrainians see that Zelensky doesn't want to reduce mobilization age, that these are the Western countries who wants to reduce, not him, and he does everything he can to do this. Of course, this will bring him some points, because now Ukrainians know if president election starts, and for example Zaluzhny or somebody else will be for the lowering of the mobilization age, and people will know that Zelensky is not for this process, and they will vote for him, and he can win the next term. And then of course he will lower the mobilization age, because it's just a trick for people, nothing more, to complete successfully the election campaign. Another important thing is that Zelensky, just interesting thing that I would like to point to attention, the Verkhovna Rada, that was the parliament of Ukraine, voted to extend martial law and mobilization for another 90 days. And you know, that's very interesting that this martial law will be ended by the 9th of May. So as you can see, this is very funny. Zelensky during the previous days made lots of statements that he wants to finish the war in 2025, and maybe this martial law is the last martial law in this war in Ukraine. And if this information is true, if this is going to happen like this, so this might be like the final martial law in Ukraine, then Zelensky will try to make the 9th of May the day of victory over Russia. So you know that 9th of May is something very important for the Russians, because they, not just Russians, but for former Soviet country states, or most of these countries, celebrates 9th of May as the day of victory over Hitler and Nazi Germany. And this is a very, very important date for Russians, and Zelensky wants to turn this date, 9th of May, as a day of victory over Russia. So we'll see how is it going to happen, and whether it's going to happen or not, because there are very high chances that then on the 9th of May, Russians may begin celebrating victory, not just over the Hitler and Nazi Germany, but over some other state in the Eastern Europe. So we'll see what is going to be next, but obviously the situation is very interesting. Now let's move further. Let's discuss the situation along the line of combat contact, and very interesting details are coming from the Sumi region. During the previous night, we got lots of statements that the Russians were bombing and attacking the Sumi region, and later we got additional details, and the sources are saying that the Russians somehow managed to find out the place where the Ukrainian officers of the Sumi direction were holding the meeting, trying to understand and to plan what Ukrainian forces are going to do next in the Suji direction. The Russians managed to discover these positions, they attacked this territory, and Ukrainians suffer significant losses. And the most important thing is that Ukrainians currently have very huge and big problem in the Suji direction. According to information we have, the Russians, maybe you saw videos in the past, managed to redeploy lots of units or lots of pieces of North Korean 170 millimeters Koksan self-propelled guns. This is very important because these guns, these artillery guns, can attack or has a firing range of up to 60 kilometers. And Ukrainians currently don't know what to do with these artillery systems because they can't just get them. They can't just get them because they are too far from them. Ukrainians can use just HIMARS missiles to destroy these cheap North Korean Koksan self-propelled guns. So which is very not which is not smart, we understand. And when talking about the Suji direction itself, let's assume that for example the Russians concentrate or have their artillery system with this North Korean artillery system somewhere in the vicinity of the settlement by the name of Kupyansk. Let's try to understand what is 60 kilometers in this area. For example, this is the 60 kilometers. So as you can see, the Russians with these North Korean artillery systems, 170 millimeters artillery systems, can cover and can control the entire Suji direction, being completely invisible and being completely impossible to be hit from the Ukrainian side. And now the Ukrainians don't know basically what to do this. Of course, this is not the biggest issue the Ukrainians have in the Suji direction, but this is another problem they are facing right now and they don't have solution for. Now let's move further and let's discuss the situation in the Kupyansk direction. According to information we have, during the previous 24 hours, the Russians managed to restore control over some territories on the settlement of Kolesnikovka. I'll remind you that in the late December and the early January, the Ukrainians carried out several counter-offensive operations in this direction with the purpose to slow the Russians down in the Boguslavka direction. The Russians were pretty active there and were pretty successful. And as a result of those Ukrainian counterattacks, they managed to restore control over Kolesnikovka, and now we see how the Russian soldier was raising the flag over the same settlement let's say in the central part. Based on this video, we have adjusted the map and we see that now the Russians are trying to force the Ukrainians to fall back from Kolesnikovka further in the northern directions towards the settlement of Glushkovka. And a little bit further in the northern direction, we got another video of how the Russians were bombing and attacking the Ukrainian positions on the territory of the high-rise building area. Maybe this is the territory of Ukrainian concentration of force or temporary deployment point. Now let's move further and let's discuss the situation in the Boguslavka-Barova direction. Today, different pro-Russian sources reported that as a result of offensive operation, the Russians managed to improve their positions significantly, and basically the Russians managed to reach the outskirts of the settlement of Zeleny Gai. Very important progress. And also we have some geolocations from the same territory. In this video that was published by the 3rd Azov Brigade Storm Assault Brigade of the Armored Forces of Ukraine, we can see how the Ukrainians managed to discover the concentration of the Russian troopers along the tree line, and then the Ukrainians began bombing and attacking the Russian forces there. Based on this video, we have adjusted the map in Russian favor. All these territories territories were considered as a contested area, and now we have no doubts that the Russians managed to semi-encircle or half surround the village of Zeleny Gai from the northeast, from the east, and from the southeast. So most likely the village is very small, as you can see, and most likely during the next 48 hours the Russians will be able to take the settlement under complete control and to force Ukrainians to fall back further in the western directions towards the village of Borisovka Andreevka. This is very complicated situation, because if the Russians are able to do this, they will enter the operational space in this direction, and then they can do whatever they like and they can attack in any direction. As for the Liman direction, during the previous 24 hours, nothing special, just counter-artillery duels. The Ukrainian forces lost several artillery systems, and probably that's it. Now let's discuss the situation in the city of Chasiv Yar. As for this direction, we have three important icons, and every single one of them is about some changes on map. Let's discuss the situation in the industrial zone. Today the Ukrainian sources published the video how they were FPV droning and attacking the Russian assault troopers on the territory of the industrial zone, and based on this video we have colored at least some part of this territory. I'll remind you that according to pro-Ukrainian sources and neutral resources, the territory of this industrial zone was already captured by the Russians several days ago. We were very surprised by pro-Ukrainian sources. Today Deep State reported that the Russians, as a result of offensive operation, managed to establish complete control over the Novy micro district that is located in the southern part of the central Chasiv Yar. So this is the map. This is the changes on the ground, as you can see. This is the map before the end of the 14th of January. This is at the end of the 15th of January. Furthermore, according to geolocations we have, the Russians currently trying to cross the Seversky Donetsk-Donbass canal and to advance deep inside of this forest. We made these conclusions based on the video that was published by the Russian side. In this video we can see how the Russian assault troopers were clearing the Ukrainian positions along this Seversky Donetsk-Donbass canal, and the Russians finished all their tasks. Now let's talk about the city of Toretsk, because most likely the most important updates are coming exactly from this territory. Today we have at least 3 geolocations from the northern part of the city of Chasiv Yar, 1 geolocation from the northwestern part, and let's discuss them in details. Today the Ukrainian sources published the video from the northwestern part of the city of Chasiv Yar. In this video we can see how the Ukrainians were FPV droning and attacking Russian units exactly in this point. Based on this video we haven't colored anything. This is just another confirmation that show us the exact Russian positions and the Russian presence in this part of the city. The map was adjusted in the vicinity of the Toretsk mine and the landfill. This is the map, for example, this is the map by the end of the 14th of January, and this is the map by the end of the 15th of January. As you can see, significant territories came under complete Russian control based on the videos that were published by the 28th Brigade of the Armored Forces of Ukraine. In this video we can see lots of strikes, attacks of Ukrainian FPV drones on the Russian positions. Based on this video we have adjusted several blocks in Russian favor. In this video we can see a few more FPV drone attacks on the Russian positions in this part of the city of Toretsk. Based on this video we have adjusted several more icons, and the final video is coming from the southern part of this industrial zone. In this video that was also published by the Ukrainians, we can see lots of episodes of how Ukrainians were FPV droning the concentration of Russian forces in this part of the city. We will not watch the video due to the violence there. So we see that lots of territories were colored in Russian favor. The most important, the Russians entered the industrial zone itself, and the battle for the main stronghold, for the final bastion of Ukrainian positions in this direction has begun. Furthermore, it's according to geolocations, but when talking about different articles and different messages that today were sent by the soldiers from this direction, today according to information we have, the city of Toretsk, also known as Dzerzhinsk, has been liberated and came under the control of the Russian forces. That was stated by pro-Russian resources today, somewhere at 5 p.m. of the local time. So maybe the battle for the city of Toretsk has ended. Obviously, there are going to be different, let's say, actions. There are still lots of job to do to clear the territory, to raise the flag, and to announce this victory before the Trump's inauguration. So this is the situation in the Toretsk direction. Now let's discuss the situation in the Pokrovsk direction, where the Russians also managed to improve their positions. But as for these territories, you can see there are lots of icons, but not so many changes on the ground in Russian favor. Lots of changes from Ukrainian control into the contested area. The Russians, according to information we have, managed to answer the southwestern part of Zverova. This information was provided us by neutral mappers and by pro-Russian mappers. The Russians, according to neutral mappers, also managed to improve their positions between the settlement of Udachne and the settlement of Kotlina. If you remember, just yesterday the same information was provided us by pro-Ukrainian mappers, but the Ukrainian sources were talking just about the southern part of the railways. And now, according to information we have, by the end of the 15th of January, the Russians most likely managed to establish both the northern and the southern part of the railways between the settlement of Udachne and Kotlina. We're expecting the beginning of very, let's say, fast lightning assault operations in the direction of both villages as well. According to information we have, the Russians also managed to improve their positions to the west of Novovasilievka and to take few more buildings under complete control on the territory of the settlement of Uspenovka. There are very heavy clashes. The Ukrainians are showing resistance. The Russians are moving in the western direction, but not so fast. Yes, every day we are coloring and changing the map in Russian favor, but it's not so fast. We see that indeed the Ukrainians are trying to stabilize the situation, and they are sending more and more forces to do this. The Russians began advancing along the rivers in the direction of Novoalexandriivka from the southeast. At least we came to this conclusion based on the map update that was published by pro-Ukrainian mappers. So this is the next village the Russians are planning to take under control. As for the Andreevka fortified area, according to information we have, currently the Russians are trying to break through the Ukrainian positions and defense belt in these villages and then to begin advancing further in the southern direction with the purpose to attack Andreevka from the north. We got lots of statements, lots of different map changes on the ground according to pro-Russian resources, neutral mappers, and pro-Ukrainian sources. So summarizing everything, we can make a conclusion that most likely both the village of Yasenova and Novoandreevka would be captured by the Russians within the next 72 hours, or at least the Russians will be able to improve their position significantly, and then it's going to be just a matter of several days before the beginning of offensive in the southern direction. As for the Kurakhove direction, during the previous 24 hours we also got lots of important changes. The Russians are saying that during the previous 24 hours the Russians were trying to take under control this dense network of the fortifications that goes between the settlement of Petropavlovka and the northern part of Andreevka. As you can see, there is a very big trenches, very huge fortified areas, several kilometers in length, and the Russians began advancing on the territory of this stronghold. I'll remind you that during the previous 5 days, pro-Ukrainian and neutral mappers reported and then confirmed Russian control over this complex network of the fortifications to the east of Andreevka and to the southeast of Andreevka. Now the Russians are trying to take under control the trenches to the northeast of Andreevka. Very important steps from the Russian side. If Andreevka fortified area falls, then the situation for the Ukrainians is going to be very difficult. And the main thing that this situation repeats the same situation that we used to see in the settlement of Novomikhailivka. I'll try to remind you. The battle for Novomikhailivka took around a year. The battle for Konstantinovka took around 6 months. The battle for Katerinovka and Antonovka took around 3 months or even 2 months. The battle for Ilinka and Zavetovka took less than a month. The battle for the entire territory took less than probably 2 weeks. So the same situation we are going to see in this direction as well. The battle for Kurakhove took 6 months. The battle for Bastion will take 3 months, 2 months. And the further the Russians are moving in the western direction, the faster battles are going to take place and the less time it will require from the Russians. As for the geolocations, according to information we have, the Russians continue moving and advancing along the river of Sukhiye Yali. In this video we can see how the Russians were trying to set on fire the stronghold of the armored forces of Ukraine exactly in this point. Based on this video we have adjusted the map in Russian favor. The Russians are advancing, trying to outflank the Ukraine positions in Dachne and basically to force the Ukrainians to fall back from this area. As for the Velika Novoselovka direction, during the previous 24 hours we got several videos of how the Russians were bombing and attacking the Ukrainian positions with very heavy artillery systems, but without any changes on the ground, without let's say taking any actions with the purpose to assault the settlement or agglomeration itself. The Russians continue tightening the noose around the settlement, but without changes on the ground, as you can see. And that's it for today. Military Summary channel reminds we condemn any violence in the world. Thank you for watching. Subscribe to my channel, put your likes, join my Patreon, and have a good day. Bye bye.